Good morning, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the UU Church of Tullahoma, to those of you who are here, to those of you who are on Zoom, and also to those of you who are on YouTube. Welcome, everyone. Carrie, would you like the chalice? 53. I have a reading. I thought I had it marked. We come together this morning to remind one another to rest for a moment on the forming edge of our lives, to resist the headlong tumble into the next moment until we claim for ourselves awareness and gratitude, taking the time to look into one another's faces and see there is communion, the reflection of our own eyes. This is the house of laughter and silence, and memory and hope is hallowed by our presence together. Announcements. And I do have an announcement for those of you who are on Zoom and are on the UU list. I did send out the responsive reading this morning around 7:15. So check your emails if you want to participate in the responsive reading. Any other announcements? Janet?
Well, just remember the next week for my talk, kind of an autumn remembrance talk, to if you want to tell a story about someone you've lost, whether it be animal or human. It could even be a place or a house, or it's about loss. Something to represent that. We can put it on the little remembrance altar, and of course it'll all be very private and off YouTube. So.
Okay. Thank you. Any other announcements?
We have a retreat coming up, and we have, I think, 3 people bringing soup.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it'd be really nice if people that aren't bringing soup or anything would bring drinks. So if you're coming and not bringing anything to eat, then if you would bring drinks, that would be great.
Mm-hmm. Or a bag of ice.
Yeah,
We could probably use a couple of bags of ice.
I'm also using my bread machine, and I'm freezing bread as I go, so
Oh.
Oh,
some bread.
wow.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, then I won't buy
Fantastic.
bread. Oh, yeah, that sounds so good. There's nothing like bread with a good bowl of soup.
I know, yeah. Good hearty bread.
Jim?
Yes, okay. So I have several announcements, and all of these, or most of this, goes back to our congregational meeting on October 2nd, and some things that have happened since then. So the board did meet the following week, which is a week earlier than normal, and mainly to address some items that came up during that congregational meeting. So the board did establish a finance committee and an outreach committee. So the finance committee has met, and what came out of that is we have the routine duties of the treasurer covered for the short term, and that is Costa has agreed to take on that day-to-day routine business of the treasurer, but this is short term. Costa's not going to do this forever, so we do need a treasurer. We need one. Seriously, we need a treasurer, so somebody please step up and take on that role. The other thing is there will be a special board meeting this evening at 6 p.m. on Zoom, and that's also came out of the Finance Committee actions. And the board is going to authorize 2 more signers to our Ascend Credit Union account, and that'll be Costa and the president and me. So that, and that's pretty routine to have the president as a secondary signer on accounts for most not-for-profits. That's very usually done. So that's what's up with the Finance Committee. And then, as mentioned, we do have a retreat coming up. I think it's going to start at 10 o'clock on Saturday, November 5th. And I think what's planned is about 10:30, we'll have a congregational discussion. And that's a time when the board members can give you an update on what's happened. And there will be reports from those two committees. The Finance Committee can report in a little more in detail what they've done, and the Outreach Committee can report on their, an update on what they've done. So, and then after that, there will be an opportunity for everybody who's present to kind of share their feelings, thoughts on how things are going with the church. So that's it for me. Thank you.
Debbie?
Yeah, Janet.
How about if we have a time limit on that congregational meeting so we can guarantee to have some fun instead of spend the whole time hashing things out again?
Yeah, the finance committee, I mean, not the finance, the retreat committee has wanted to do 30 minutes to where the president speaks, the finance committee can tell us what they have done, the outreach committee can tell us what their plans are, and limit it to 30 minutes with no congregational discussion. I just don't want to get anybody's fears or we want to have fun. And then we thought afterwards we could have, after a lot of the events have taken place, we could have a congregational meeting and talk about how we feel about the church after we've had fun, playing with each other, talking with each other. That is what the program committee has decided on.
Great.
Okay, if you would like to donate to our church, please make check payable to UU Church at Tullahoma and send to our treasurer, Costa Bryce, at P.O. Box 331, Tullahoma 37338. Or we have a shaker box at the back of the box next to Larry. Our responsive reading is 444. And I apologize for not having music. I do not sing. When I do sing, I've had people turn the radio off. And John has told me that he didn't think anybody could mess up Christmas carols as bad as I can. So I apologize for no music. 444. This house is for the ingathering of nature and human nature.
It is a house of friendships, a haven in trouble, an open room for the encouragement of our struggle.
It is a house of freedom, guarding the dignity and worth of every person.
It offers a platform for the free voice, for declaring both in times of security and danger the full and undivided conflict of opinion.
It is a house of truth-seeking, where scientists can encourage devotion to their quest, where mystics can abide in a community of searchers.
It is a house of art, adorning its celebrations with melodies and handiworks.
It is a house of prophecy, outrunning times past and times present, in visions of growth and progress.
This house is a cradle for our dreams, the worship of our common endeavor.
I thought that was very appropriate for the time.
Very.
And now I'd like to introduce our speaker, John. I'm so glad to have you here, and he's going to speak to us about the history of time. That sounds really interesting. Thank you. Come on up, John.
Okay.
Do you want to stand for the whole time, John, or do you want to sit sometime?
I've got a stool over here if you'd like to.
I think I can manage it.
Okay.
If I don't, I'll lay down and we can swing the camera pointing down at my face.
Because I did buy a bar stool because I was having trouble standing.
Well, good morning, world.
Good morning.
What time is it?
10:28.
10:28? Okay, so 10:48, I should shut my mouth up. We'll go on about something else. I've spent a lot of time wondering what time is about and what causes time. One of the big questions I've had for a long time is, why do we have 7 days a week? Why 7? Why not 8 or 9? Why not 5 or 6? These are some of the questions that I looked at in this talk, and I am very fearful this morning. I'm usually fairly confident what I'm going to say to people, but this morning I've gone over it several times with my dear wife, Carrie. Thank you, Carrie, so much for going over this with me. But it's the idea of what is time is such a scattered idea, and I may seem rather scattered in my approach to it this morning. So buckle up, bear with me, and we'll be through in hopefully about 20 minutes. Let me take my watch and see. It's about almost 10:30, so I'll make this fast. We know what time is, or we know what time it is. That is, we can look at our watch and I can see that it's 10:30, but we still don't know what time is. We frequently ask, what time is it when we're going to dinner? And what day and time are we going on vacation? How long will we be gone? What are we asking? What is this stuff called time? Is it even stuff? I took a lot of my talk from YouTube videos because there are a lot of excellent lectures on YouTube now. I could sit and watch YouTube all day long and just. Brian Greene is a physicist who did a talk on the illusion of time, and a lot of the things I've got here are taken from his talk on YouTube, which I believe was also a PBS program. And here's what Brian Greene says about time. He says, anything that gives constant repetitive motion can be used as a clock. The earth turning on its axis is accurate to the to the length of an hour. A pendulum swinging in an arc gives us minutes, hours, and seconds. Remember when the quartz watches were very popular? Everybody wanted a quartz watch. Why did we want a quartz watch? They were very accurate. They could measure time down to the thousandth of a second. Well, we've got that beat these days. I found out in listening to Brian Greene's talk that we measure time in 9 billionths of a second now using the ticks of a cesium atom, and that's 9,192,631,770 ticks per second. So that's very accurate. Brian Greene says that is more than accurate accurate to 1 second in 100 million years. So if we have a cesium clock, we can be sure we'll be on time. The famous scientist Isaac Newton considered time a constant thing throughout the universe. His understanding of time was accepted from the mid-1700s until the early 20th century, when Albert Einstein proved that time could be bent and stretched. Isaac Newton would not have liked that. Time moved faster in some situations than in others. It was affected by gravity and motion. One of the things I found out that if I'm standing on the top of a mountain and you're standing down in the valley, my clock is going to run slower than your clock. And these are some crazy things that happen to time according to Albert Einstein, in which physics today agrees with, that it is difficulty. Time is like inches. It's a measurement. There's no fluid, there's no ether, there's no nothing out there that is time. We can't, as the song says, we cannot save time in a bottle. There's nothing there to save. time is simply a measurement. It's like saying 12 inches. Well, 12 inches doesn't mean that there's something we can grab hold of. Those 12 inches we can grab hold of. We can grab hold of something that is 12 inches long for sure, but we can't hold 12 inches in our hands. By the same token, we can't hold 12 minutes in our hand or 12 seconds in our hand. Although Einstein's discoveries and formulas are still used today in many scientific uses, his formulas are confusing to most of us, and the good news is we can use Newton's formulas and methods for most of our daily calculations involving space and time. That is, we don't have to worry about relativity when we say, what time are you going to show up for dinner tonight? You don't have to do a calculation of, well, how heavy is his car? How fast will he be going in that car? We don't have to throw those calculations into it as Professor Einstein told us about. From the time we began walking upright, we've had certain things that help us tell what time it is. One of the most obvious things that tells us what time it is the sun. Well, the sun doesn't actually go round, but we have that illusion that the sun goes round, and that is one of the first timepieces that we used. We later learned to look at the time of a shadow moving across the landscape. That gave us another piece of the puzzle of how we measure this time, how we use time. We learned we could measure smaller increments by observing repetitive instances, such as the sun's shadow passing on the ground. Also, we observed, as Galileo did around 1600, that a swinging pendulum would give us a regular time, that it took, all things considered, a swinging pendulum, if it's energized. And Galileo thought, maybe I could make a clock of this, but Galileo only got the theory together, and it took the scientist Christian Huygens to actually build such a clock. I believe there's a space a telescope now called the Huygens telescope. I'm not sure. Oh, here's a fun fact for you. Fun fact. This is to pick up the mood of everything. Clocks were first referred to those instruments that chimed the hour and the quarter hour. So that was a clock. And a timepiece was just called a timepiece. If it didn't do it, if it only had a dial on the front, it was called a timepiece. So there were clocks and there were timepieces. Clocks were a little more expensive, I guess, than timepieces. I don't know. It seems like there would be a little more complicated to be able to strike quarter hour. Although clocks became a very popular device and were relatively good at keeping time, the pendulum clock had one big flaw when it came to sailors. Sailors needed something that would keep regular time. And if you can imagine a ship doing this and a pendulum doing this, the result is not very, very handy. And I talked to my friend Tom back there and said, Tom, would you help me? When it comes to discussion of this longitude and latitude, I need someone who's a sailor to tell us a little bit more about what that involves, because Christopher Columbus did not have a good, accurate timepiece. So he wound up coming in some place and he thought, this looks like it's probably India. So I'll call these people Indians. And because Christopher Columbus didn't have a good, accurate clock, he couldn't measure longitude. That is I'm not going to get into it. Tom will help us out. Tom will help us when we get to the discussion part. But Christopher Columbus blundered into a piece of land because he didn't have a good clock. And a good clock wasn't developed until John Harrison built one around, what does it say? I said 1530, that's not right. It would have been 1730. I should check my facts before I go on the air. Hello, America. 1730, that's when he developed the first naval chronometer. Now what this was, basically it was a clock, and he could put it on board a ship. It was in a box about the size of a refrigerator, the first one, but it could keep accurate time as people sailed east and west. And by checking that time, they would know where they were in relationship to the globe of the earth, how far the earth had turned as they were sailing east and west, or west and east for that matter. There are all sorts of obstacles that got in the way of us using time accurately. We had that one that didn't get solved until 1730 with John Harrison's naval chronometer. But one of the second big issues that came up was when the train was invented back in the first steam locomotives. When they first came about, the people in one town might not know what time it was in another town, because people got their time set by where the sun was. So if you thought, well, hey, when is noon? Anybody know?
Sun's straight up.
Straight up.
When the sun's straight up. But when the sun is straight up in the sky in Chattanooga, what's it going to be here? It's going to be later.
Earlier. No, it's not.
Yeah.
It's earlier.
Chattanooga's an hour ahead of us.
Oh, okay. Thank you. This is a participatory project we got going here. I appreciate it very much. But railway time was first standardized by the Great Western Railway in New England in November 1840. So it was just about 100 years after the naval chronometer was developed. So if your naval needs timing, you would use a naval chronometer. I would like to say one thing about the naval chronometer. I told you it was about the size of a refrigerator when the first one came out, but later they were developed until they became pocket watches. So within about 100 years' time, sailors were able to use a pocket watch size device called, again, a naval chronometer to look and see where they were, which was a pretty neat technological feat to be able to build a clock like that. I'm checking my clock to see how I'm doing. Okay, we've talked about the standard of railroad time, the standard which led to the daylight savings time. There's also another standard that we follow, and that's the 7-day week, and that's what I want to talk about now, is the 7-day week, and why do we have a 7-day week? Well, I at first thought that the Old Testament was the origin of the week in which God labored 6 days and took the seventh day off as a day of rest. But that turns out not to be the case. It was the Babylonians who got the idea from, or it was the Hebrews who got the idea from the Babylonians, who 2,600 years before 2600 BC, the Babylonians had a 7-day week. Now, why the number 7? Well, it was not exactly as the Bible did not establish the 7-day week. The 7-day week, as I say, was established by the Babylonians. One of the things about the days of the week is the numbers. The number 7 seems to be a significant number. There are 7 wonders of the world, 7 colors of the rainbow, 7 deadly sins, 7 seas, 7 chakras, 7 white keys on a piano.